solid work at 200 words.
Writing is hard. Psychologists are often misportrayed.
We're using my voice.
We all have to start somewhere.
Yeah, I know.
What was your hello?
Oh, well, I said, I'm the first one to turn this on today, and so am I the first one to say hello to you, blessed machine that has brought so much joy to my life?
Now it's my turn. Good morning, little Padre.
Good morning.
How does it feel to be a first-time novelist?
I don't think I qualify for that title.
How does it feel attempting to write a novel for the first time?
It's a nice activity for an old man to do in retirement.
I got my drink. You got your drink. You want to cheers?
Cheers.
Cheers! This first started because you walked in one day and told me that basically, turns out writing's kind of hard. Right?
Yes. Okay.
So do you want to expand upon your first sort of realization, or shall we take it back a little bit? You retired.
Yes.
Even further. Gotta just keep bringing it back, because actually you've written plenty of stuff before. You just haven't written novels before. Like you've had papers published.
Right.
And you like to read.
Yes.
Fiction and nonfiction.
Yes.
And yet when you tried writing a novel for the first time, you were like, oh.
Yeah. The other thing I want to mention about the backstory is that I have kept a journal for like 40 years.
Yes.
Almost.
Yes.
And which is going to be, it's going to be a wonderful, terrible thing for you and your sibs to read after I'm dead and gone, because you'll see the ramblings of a neurotic man who you thought was your father. So I guess one thing I noticed when I was working at the university and writing technical styled APA style papers, I noticed that I really struggled with words. I knew what to say basically because I knew that I had the knowledge in my head. Yeah. But sometimes putting it down on paper was just a hard thing to do. And so I had colleagues that could just kind of throw the words on the page, and writing was not a problem for them at all. Yeah. But writing was always the part of things that I struggled with the most. Okay, interesting. I didn't know that. And again, I published enough to get to pass my tenure review, so it couldn't have been such a problem.
It couldn't have been that bad.
Right.
Yeah.
It's kind of like an observation of mine about ADHD is that no matter who you talk to, everybody claims to have trouble with concentration. Focus, I'm always distracted. That's everybody says that, and yet ADHD is a problem that only a few have. Yeah. But anyway, I guess the thing that I noticed really from the get-go is that there's a big difference between effective writing and entertaining writing. Okay, so like the difference between cutting to the point and like telling a tale, weaving a story. Yeah. Okay. I mean, effective writing is I'm trying to communicate some information. Right. I'm getting the message across. I'm telling you the who, what, where, why, and how. Right. Okay? Yeah. That's really pretty easy. But it can be pretty dull. Yes. Okay? If you stick to that. Yeah. And so it's another thing to be able to write it in a way where the reader actually has a sense of being there, where a reader gets involved with the character, has this empathic connection, and actually feels as if they're experiencing it through this fictitious person. Yeah. Okay? Okay. All right. And that is the difference between good writing and not writing. Words on a page? Yeah. Right. Okay. So I think that you can take a pretty blah storyline, and if you have good writing, you can make it incredibly entertaining. So this is one of those things that I think a lot of people debate surrounding originality almost, because obviously things like vampires have been done before. You read a lot of like maybe Jack Reacher style stuff. Yeah. That's been done before. Oh, yeah. By a lot of different people. It's all in how they're telling it that makes it unique. Or like the characters, you could argue, which could go back to how they're telling it in the first place. Yeah, that character development's a big part of things.
Yeah.
Do I feel for this person?
Right.
Is there some part of this person that I identify with,
Yeah.
or that I wish I could identify with?
Right.
You know?
So I know that the novel you're writing now is one that you're pulling on some of your own like knowledge base for, but how are you attempting to like infuse your main character with different traits? Or is that something that you're kind of just like, I'll worry about it after?
Well, no, that was something, yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that one, because that was another thing that dawned on me. As we get older,
Okay.
we do this backward looking, we call it reminiscence.
Yeah.
So basically, I worked the last half of my life as a psychologist in the VA, and I did psychotherapy with a number of different people. And psychotherapy is an incredibly fascinating human experience where you have this exchange of values that takes place, even though as a psychologist, it's my job to remain value free and allow this other person I'm trying to help to use and follow their own values, not mine. Right?
Yeah.
So, but you always have this exchange of things, because anytime you have two people together, and if they're together in a meaningful kind of way, they're going to influence each other. So every person I ever saw had a personal impact on me. And of course, I assume I'm having a personal impact on them.
Yeah.
So I wanted to kind of write a little bit about what a hypothetical therapy session would go like, and tell it from the perspective more so of the psychologist. And so that was one aspect of it. And the other aspect of it that I wanted to delve into was a little bit of spirituality and religious values. And so how would somebody who's supposed to remain value-free, how would that person react if somebody came into their office and said, well, I'm happily married, but I don't think my wife is my soulmate.
Right.
I think my soulmate is actually somebody that I dated in high school.
Right.
Okay?
Yeah.
I don't believe in the concept of soulmates.
Yeah.
And so anyway, if somebody had walked in my office and said that kind of thing, I'm sure I would go, well, wait, what? And so how would you work through that? And how could somebody that really doesn't share the same values as the person coming in for help, how would you go about helping them through that and help them come up with a solution? Okay?
Yeah.
So, do we need
You're
to...
good. I was just scooting back to more your level. Well, something I want to note right here that I think is interesting is that a lot of people, when they start writing, or actually any book almost, gosh, this is a whole other discussion, but separating the artist from the art, right? But I think a lot of people come in with personal feelings for wanting to explore a potential topic. And while the soulmate one, I wouldn't say is like, other than you just being generally interested in this concept, but you've talked a lot about how psychologists are often misportrayed in media. So for you, I think there's your personal part of it is trying to show a more real look at what a psychologist would actually be able to do for someone, and not misrepresenting the relationship there.
Right.
So I just think it's interesting. We all bring a little bit, and so I feel like that's your little bit. Now I'm gonna teach them something,
Yeah, well, or at least give them a little bit different perspective.
I'm gonna give them a different perspective. Yeah.
So my biggest pet peeve, and I know you're aware of this, is how in books and movies and whatever they portray psychologists, psychiatrists, physicians as getting involved in a romantic relationship with their patients. And although that does happen, clearly,
you can't
clearly
say
it does.
Yeah.
It is far and away a minority, rare kind of thing.
Yeah.
And of course, we have ethics that prevent that, but the fact that you do have a stated ethical code that says thou shalt not do this means that obviously some people were, and that we better put it in writing.
We gotta
damn
make it,
sure that people don't do this.
Right.
But anyway, it's a rare kind of thing, whereas in movies and stories and such, It's
much more
portrayed
common.
like it's a common thing.
Yeah.
So that's one thing. And then the other thing is that whenever you go see a psychologist, if the psychologist is doing what they should, they're not in advice giving mode. And so, of course, the patient comes in and wants an answer and thinks, well, I'll see what the psychologist has to say about it. Give me an answer. I've got a problem. I'm going to ask a question. I want you to give me the answer and you give me the solution. Well, that's not the way we work.
Right. You're trying to lead the person to figuring it out for themselves.
Whenever you use that word lead.
Yeah.
So where am I going to lead them to?
Right.
So if I'm doing the leading, that means,
that's putting more of your own influence and values and whatever.
Right. So really what I want to do is I want to make them aware exactly of what they think. And then using their value system, I want to give them all the tools such that they can plot their own path and lead themselves.
Right.
Okay. And so that's basically what I'm doing in this book.
Okay.
But then the part about the soulmate actually allows me to explore a lot of different ways of having or not having faith, all the way from having zero faith in religion to being all the way in and being fundamental.
A believer by the book.
By the
whatever.
book, right, exactly.
Yeah.
So anyway, I have various characters that I have in there that are going to voice these kind of things, and at least the characters that I have in there are more or less composites of people that I have interacted with in my life.
Okay.
Friends or acquaintances along my life. The question you asked like 5 minutes before I went off on this tangent about, was how to write and how do you build all it. One thing I realized was that all these characters that I've written so far are using my voice, it seems to me. And so it's almost as if I'm having a conversation with 6 or 7 different versions of myself.
Okay. Interesting.
So that's something I need to go back and fix.
During the revision stage.
Exactly. But that was something, that was a realization I had. I did not go into it knowing I had that problem.
I think that's something that you and I, one of the first things we talked about when you were discussing this was when you were realizing you just needed to push forward rather than going back and attempting to edit as you go and stuff like that. Yeah.
In contrast, there were a couple of decisions I made that I felt like I had to make early because I'm trying to tell it from the perspective of one person, more or less. However, there's a number of different ways to do that. And so, am I going to be a narrator?
Right.
Am I going to have it in third person?
Yeah.
Or am I going to do what I chose to do? I'm just going to have conversations.
Okay.
And if there's a thought inside this person, the main character, I'm going to have that thought come out instead of having a little narrated or parenthetical kind of or whatever.
Yeah.
I'm going to have it come out just in a conversation with one of these other characters.
That's an interesting thing because it's not necessarily even at this stage potentially a novel so much as it could be almost a play format or something. Yeah.
Right.
So it'll be something that once you finish this first draft or whatever, that's when you have to ask yourself before the revision stage, what do I really want to do?
Yeah.
Because I know you just mentioned about figuring out, what kind of tense you want to tell it in and what perspective and stuff. I had one story that was like just dying to come out at one point. It did come out, but I alternated between first person and third person so many times in that story as I was telling it because I didn't think through that part to begin with. I was just like, I want to tell it, I want to do this. So when I have to go back to the revision, it's been choosing which one I want and then editing all of those scenes to be a little bit different so that it can fit that thing.
I don't know, I found that to be kind of hard. If you want to say what's on your mind, it's a lot easier just to write it down like in a paragraph, this is what I was thinking, rather to construct a fictitious conversation where it comes out that way.
Yeah.
Right. He said this or I said this.
Right. Yeah.
I opted out of that.
You decided no.
I decided not to do that. And that, surprisingly, actually loses a lot. So there's a difference between you need to pick your next words very carefully. And he squinted, tilted his head a little bit to the side and said slowly, you better pick your next words carefully.
Right.
Boy.
Right. The boy.
Yeah, I figured I could go back in and put that in later on.
So you know what I think is interesting is that while I think that having your story be told in a play format is just as valid as anything else, there are a lot of authors who write the way you're writing for their first draft, or what I call a zero draft, or almost call this their outline, where they're figuring out their story, and it's easier to do through dialogue. Because depending on which kind of writer you are, I think some people lean toward character-driven versus plot-driven, and if you're a character-driven writer, what's most important is the impact the characters are having on each other and how they're kind of navigating the story. So when they're outlining for the first time or they're thinking up the story, you just have the characters go back and forth through the whole thing.
Oh,
it's
well,
kind
good.
of,
Then I'm not the only one.
You're not, and there's also no right or wrong way to start a story, because nothing in this first draft or the zero draft or even the second or third draft usually is seen potentially by other people. So you can make as many mistakes as you want. And then,
Oh, I've got no delusions that anybody will want to read this thing.
Well, that's what I saw you put on your notes. No goal other than to write.
Yeah.
No delusion about marketability.
Yeah, I'm just doing this for fun.
You're doing this for fun. Well, I think this leads into my question I have, because I have two questions for you at least. The first question is, could you define what a writer is for me?
So a writer is somebody like a good writer.
Oh.
Okay, as opposed to anybody can write, anybody that's been through the first couple of years of school can write words on a page.
Okay.
So we're not talking about somebody that can just write words on a page. We're talking about a writer is somebody that communicates in a way that is interesting for other people to read.
Okay, interesting, yeah.
Okay, so when I was in academia and trying to get published, I wouldn't have called myself a writer. I would have called myself a scientist, a researcher, an academician. Okay. Obviously writing is part of it.
Do you consider yourself a writer now that you are indeed attempting to write
No.
the story? Okay, no. Interesting.
No.
So within the writing community, I say as if I could speak for the entirety of the writing community, try not to gatekeep who is and isn't a writer, right? Because then so much of being a good writer is ultimately subjective. What one person thinks is good isn't what another person thinks is good. I think someone who writes in their free time is a writer.
Describe myself as an athlete. I'm clearly not a professional athlete, but I spend a hell of a lot of time exercising.
You do it a lot,
but
yeah.
Here's what I think might be a useful breaking point.
Okay.
So the reason I don't consider myself a writer is that I am not writing this the purpose of this is not for consumption by other people.
Okay, interesting. Okay. Also, yeah, good.
Yeah, I guess you could have hobby writers. That,
I think that's
like you could. I'm looking at some paintings on the wall that were done by you and.
Totally. If I wanted to start painting, I could actually, I might say I like to paint. I'm a painter, but I don't want to sell my painting. There is an interesting distinction between each of these stages.
I think your question begs for an adjective.
I gotcha. Yeah.
So I'm a hobby writer.
Hobby writer.
I'm a professional writer. I'm a traditionally published writer.
Right.
Yeah. I am a New York Times best-selling author.
Ooh, interesting.
Yeah,
okay. Well, that's a whole other, we won't get into it, but there's a whole other thing between writer and author, especially because I'm part of something. This video is an authortube video, but most of us are not published authors yet, right. And so it's kind of like anyways, because I'm using my NaNoWriMo mug, my question for you, little Padre, is would you ever attempt NaNoWriMo?
Oh, yeah, sure.
50,000 words. Well, there's a camp NaNoWriMo coming up in April, and you get to choose your word count on that and your project, and if you're going to revise or whatever. So, I'm going to make you say right now, will you participate in Camp NaNoWriMo with me?
Sure, I'll do it. Yeah, especially when you give me the freedom to pick my own goal. That's just,
I know,
I can pick some little,
You can pick a little goal.
What that brings up, 50,000 words?
Right.
50,000 words. And this little silly project I've been working on, I can't believe it's like 75,000 words already, so
you crushed it.
Yeah, well, I know, but I didn't write it in 1 month.
Well,
so that's a lot. That is a lot of writing.
Mm-hmm.
in 1 month. Or I mean, it's a lot of writing from my perspective.
Yeah.
For 1 month. Yeah, I'm sure it's not much for Nora Roberts, but my gosh.
So do you remember, I didn't make you do it this year, but I used to make you guys guess how many words I was writing for NaNoWriMo or something. You don't realize until you're a writer yourself and have a concept of how many words are, what 50,000 words even means. Because sometimes I think Robert guessed like 5,000 and someone said 500,000 words one time, and it's just like...
Oh, I asked you how many words are on a page. That was my first question.
Writer versus reader. You know, I think almost all of us start out as readers and then move into writing. So naturally, we want to focus on the page count of something. But even then, we were looking at stuff. You were looking through my Discovery of Witches, trying to see what the font size looked like to determine how many pages is it actually.
Well, and I've told you, I think I prefer books that I can read in 6 hours.
Right.
If they're shorter than that, they just, they're just over with too fast, and I'm thinking, what?
Yeah.
And then if they're longer than that, though, I just get kind of fatigued, and I start thinking, I start flipping back to the back to see how many more pages I have to go, and that kind of thing.
So when you think about revising the story you're working on now, do you think you'll try and get it to a point that you yourself would want to read as a reader?
When you're doing something for fun, you don't want to turn it into work. At a certain point, if I start getting bogged down on how to say something, and I don't really like the way this sounds, how much effort am I going to put in that before I say, I don't like this. Hell with it,
Writing is hard.
Yes, writing is hard. Yeah, if it was easy, everybody could do it, and all
but also, I think it's one of those that you don't realize, because I think coming from an academic background or something where you're just trying to tell it as concisely as possible, and then getting into this like art form kind of writing, and then trying to weave a narrative and have character arcs and growth and all this stuff, you start to realize just how many things you need to keep track of and how difficult that actually is to make sure you potentially hit all these parts.
Oh, it's amazing. It really is. It is such an eye-opening experience. I mean, I'm basically doing something that if I didn't experience it exactly like I'm writing it down, it came awfully close. And it really isn't much of a stretch of my imagination. But the creativity, the things that I witness you doing, the stuff I've read, it just, I think, how in the hell do people come up with this stuff? And then how can they describe it in such detail that,
that it feels real.
That it really, that I feel like I'm experiencing it. And we've had our conversations about, the world building aspects of fantasy and the narrative kind of styles that are used more like Janet Ivanovich, and how somebody like Cormac McCarthy can take something as terrible a story as The Road and yet make it compelling reading.
Right.
I'm just amazed, and the talent and the creativity that goes into it. It is just an awesome thing.
Does it give you an appreciation for all of the stories you consume now, like even movies? Or do you think you're looking at things a little bit different than you did before you started writing one? Like, are you looking at it more analytically, or like, oh, that's interesting how they were able to do that? Or is it still in a purely consumer mode?
I don't think my viewpoint or appreciation for things has changed much as a result of going through this myself. If I consider myself to be an artistic person, which I don't, or a creative person, which I really don't, or if I consider myself to have any kind of skill in writing, which I don't, then I think I can be effective. I just don't think I'm entertaining. And you'll get a chance to read. You get a chance, but still.
We all have to start somewhere.
I know. What I do have an appreciation for is just how labor intensive the process really is.
How do you mean?
Well, it takes a lot of time.
Yeah.
And coming up, so one day I was, it was back in November when you were doing your thing.
But I was doing the interim.
Yeah, and I was thinking, hell, all I'd have to do is X number of words per day, and I could be a winner too. I'd get up and I'd get my caffeine fix and I'd go to the computer and I'd start writing away, and an hour later, and I'd have a page and a half of conversation. I felt like I was really working. I was really getting after it, and I looked at, and I didn't even bother looking at the word count because I know it had been like 200 words, maybe. And I was thinking, an hour of solid work and 200 words. Wow. How many more of these solid hours would I have to string together before I even come close to getting that, what is it, 2,500 words a day?
1,667 words a day.
Wow, my math is really off. It's 30 days in November, not 20.
Okay,
all right, let's go.
It's one of those that, again, it gets easier the more you do it, obviously. But also, there are tons of people who are slow writers, and NaNoWriMo, no matter how much they try, it doesn't work for them. Like my friend Jess that I'm doing the buddy read on, she knows that she's not going to win NaNoWriMo. Like, she might get close-ish, or during the camps when she can determine her own word count. But writing 50,000 words in 1 month is not for everyone. It's hard for me almost to know which questions to ask you because it has been so many years since I first started writing. I guess the other question is, pre-retirement, did you ever have an interest in writing a novel one day?
Pre-retirement, I knew that writing would be something that I'd be interested in. You think about the various hobbies you can do, and obviously I knew I'd be reading a lot when I retired, and I knew I'd be, spending time in the outdoors because those are the two things that I just really love to do. What do we call those things? I'm going to call them position papers. I'm going to give you my opinion on a variety of topics.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I can't give you advice forever, but I can put it in a document. So I thought I'd just put together my opinions about a variety of topics and stuff.
Yeah, this is actually reminding me of when we went to, were we in Canada when we were talking about this? When we were talking about how you and Mom should start your retirement travel log? Like a travel book that y'all would do and give your opinions on each place?
Impatient father and piddling mother.
Something like that,
I'm just trying to do fun. I want retirement to be fun.
Well, I'm gonna, because I have you and I can pull this back on record, sometimes I like to do dumb videos, like my Hallmark Wheel of Love one.
I love that one.
Thank you. I, did that in the span of however much time, and I created, a story.
Yep. Could
I get you someday to do some of these challenges with me? We can consider it a writing exercise.
Yeah, sure. I'd be happy to do anything. Like I said, I can't say no to my dog.
Yay! You didn't drink any of yours, but I drank most of mine.
Well, you had me chatting the whole time.
That's true.
Timmy, eh?
Yes. We picked excellent mugs for this video.
Quebec. I would love to go back there.
Well, Padre, thank you for doing this video with me.
Thank you. I started to call you by name. I best not do that. It was fun.
Well, all right. That is it for my chat with my newbie writer, Padre. Although he doesn't want to be called a writer quite yet, but we're gonna convince him. Please do comment down below. Let me know if there's anything you've realized over the course of your writing journey that you never would have expected. Like I said in the video, I actually didn't even know what questions to ask him because it had been so long since I started writing, and so many of us are on a different path with writing. Our journeys all look different. Like, I started in fan fiction, but he's not really super interested in fanfiction, though that might be a challenge that I give him. Also, please do comment down below and let me know what sort of challenges you would like to see me and my dad attempt together, or any of my family, because why not? But that is gonna be it for me. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see y'all very soon with a new video. Bye! I'm hoping we're in focus this whole time. One of us is at least in focus the whole time. I don't know that both of us are, but...
No, okay. Well, if one of us has to be blurry, which one we can...